Welcome to the Immigrantinlaw channel. Moving to another country almost always starts with the same question. How much money do you need to feel secure? And this is where many people make a mistake. They focus only on the cost of tickets, rent, or paperwork. But the real emergency fund for moving isn't just an amount for the first few months. It's your safety net, your comfort, and your ability to make decisions without panic. In this video, we'll figure out how much you should realistically set aside for the move, what your financial cushion should consist of, and why having too little often ends up costing more than it seems at first. Very often, people think like this. I have money for the flight, for the first month's rent, for the security deposit, and a little for daily expenses, so that's enough. In practice, this is almost never enough. The problem is that moving almost always ends up being more expensive than it looks in preliminary calculations. Even if you tried to plan for everything once you're there, expenses arise that are difficult to estimate in advance or impossible to predict accurately before arrival. After moving, expenses usually turn out to be higher than expected. Some places require several months' rent in advance. In other places, you need to urgently buy seasonal clothing, set up local phone service, pay for transportation, health insurance, document translations, household items for your home, agency fees, registration, and notary services. Sometimes there are also completely everyday expenses that seem insignificant at first glance: dishes, bedding, adapters, small appliances, and basic necessities. Even if each individual expense doesn't seem too large, together they add up to a very significant amount. Furthermore, in reality, things don't always go according to the ideal scenario. Housing may turn out to be more expensive than you expected. Finding a suitable option may take longer. Some services must be paid for immediately, with no option to postpone the decision. And all of this puts a strain on your budget right from the start. And most importantly, in the first few weeks after moving, you haven't settled in yet. You're just getting settled, getting your bearings, sorting out everyday matters, and figuring out the rules, prices, and rhythm of your new country. At this point, money isn't just a resource. It's your peace of mind and your freedom not to accept unfavorable terms just because your funds are running out. A financial cushion for moving is an amount that covers not only the move itself, but also the adjustment period that follows. In other words, it's not just about money for the trip or for the first few weeks. A real financial cushion should allow you to calmly navigate the initial stage of life in a new country without constant stress and fear of unplanned expenses. This is the reserve that allows you to avoid making hasty decisions, not skimp on truly important things, and not feel that any unexpected event put at risk your entire plan. That is precisely why a financial cushion should be viewed as part of your overall relocation preparation, not as a secondary issue. It can be divided into 3 parts. These are all the things without which the move itself is impossible or greatly complicated. Tickets, document processing, visa and consular fees if applicable, insurance, initial housing rental, security deposit, basic transportation costs, communication, translations, notarizations, copies of documents, initial household purchases of everyday essentials. This is the part where any financial planning usually begins, because these are the most obvious and predictable expenses. Without them, it is impossible to organize the move itself, entry into the country, and the first few days in your new location. You can usually calculate these expenses in advance. Yes, with a small margin, but it's still a clear part of the budget. Some amounts are known even before the trip, while others can be clarified in advance based on documents, rent, insurance, and basic household needs. The key is not to be overly optimistic when calculating this portion. It's better to set aside a small reserve right away for price fluctuations, additional fees, and incidental expenses that arise during the preparation process. That way, your initial budget will be closer to reality and won't force you to scramble for extra funds at the last minute. This is precisely the category that many people underestimate. Even if you've planned everything very carefully, the first few months almost always end up being more expensive than life after you've settled in. This is a completely normal situation. At the beginning, you're just getting used to your new environment and don't yet understand how daily expenses work in practice. You don't yet know where it's cheapest to buy groceries, which mode of transportation is most convenient, how the rental market works, which subscriptions you really need, and which ones you can do without. In addition, expenses in the early days are often not only higher, but also less predictable. What will later become clear and routine almost always requires more money at the start simply because you haven't yet established a routine or a clear system. On top of that, unplanned expenses often arise at first. You may need to find new housing if your current option turns out to be unsuitable. You have to buy missing items. Sometimes you have to go without a stable income for longer than expected. Sometimes expenses are added to this that are difficult to foresee in advance. Extra trips around town, sorting out necessary details, temporary overpayments for more convenient solutions, urgent household purchases. Individually, such expenses may seem insignificant, but together they significantly increase the budget for the first few months. That is precisely why your adjustment funds should cover at least 2 to 3 months of comfortable living, unless you are confident you'll find income sooner. This buffer gives you time to settle in, calmly handle administrative matters, and avoid feeling pressured during the most vulnerable period after moving. This is the most underestimated, yet most important part. Moving always means a change in your usual way of life. This means that even the smallest detail can turn into an extra expense. Even with good preparation, it's impossible to foresee absolutely everything because a new country, new rules, and a new rhythm of life almost always bring at least a few unexpected situations. This could be a delay with paperwork, a postponement of your start date at work, the need to quickly find alternative housing, a medical issue, an urgent trip within the country, a change in regulations, or simply a higher cost of living than you expected. Sometimes it's not about one major problem, but rather a series of small deviations from the plan, and it is precisely these that gradually put a serious strain on your budget. If you don't have a separate emergency fund, any such situation causes stress. You have to urgently reevaluate all your expenses, put off important decisions, or scramble for money at a time when things are already tough enough. And stress in a new place feels twice as intense because you don't yet have your usual support system, a familiar routine, or a sense of stability. That's why a real financial cushion isn't just enough to get by, but an amount with a buffer. You need this reserve not because you're bound to face serious difficulties, but because it allows you to navigate unexpected situations calmly without feeling that your entire move is at risk because of a single unexpected expense. Now for the main question, how much should you actually have on hand? There is no one-size-fits-all figure because it all depends on several factors. Which country you are moving to, whether you are moving alone or with your family, whether you have a job or a confirmed source of income, whether you need to rent a separate place right away, whether you're moving with children, whether you'll be buying everything you need from scratch, how quickly you'll be able to settle into normal life. The final amount depends not only on the cost of living in the country, but also on the nature of your move. One person may already have a source of income and a clear plan for the first few months, while another may need time to adapt, find housing, process paperwork, and settle into the new environment. Therefore, comparing yourself to other people's stories isn't always helpful. Even when moving to the same country, budgets can vary significantly. But there is a practical guideline that works in most cases. A minimally reasonable reserve is the sum of all initial expenses plus living expenses for 2 to 3 months. A comfortable reserve is initial expenses plus 4 to 6 months of living expenses. A reliable option is all of the above plus a separate reserve for unforeseen circumstances. This approach helps you view the move not as a one-time expense, but as a full-fledged transition period. This is especially important because the main financial challenges often arise not on the day of departure, but afterward, when real life in the new place begins. To put it simply, a good estimate looks like this. You calculate how much you need for the move and settling in, then add several months' worth of your usual monthly expenses, and finally add a reserve on top that you won't touch unless absolutely necessary. The more realistic you are in this calculation, the smoother your start will be. And it is precisely this approach that helps you not just move, but truly settle into your new home. Sometimes it seems that the main thing is just to get into the country and everything else will work out somehow. At first glance, this approach may seem bold and even practical, but in reality, a lack of money after moving very often leads not to flexibility, but to hasty decisions and constant internal stress. When your financial cushion is too small, you have almost no time to choose. You have to decide everything quickly, settle for what's available right now, and turn down more comfortable or promising options simply because you can't wait any longer. You settle for subpar housing because there's no time to look for something better. You choose unfavorable rental terms. You turn down more promising options because they need to resolve the issue immediately. You take on an excessive workload and burn out within the first few months. Sometimes this doesn't look like one big mistake, but rather a chain of small compromises. But it is precisely these compromises that often make the adjustment process harder, more expensive, and emotionally more difficult than it could have been with a calmer start. A financial cushion is needed precisely so that you have the leeway to make a rational choice, so that you can compare options, calmly go through the adjustment phase, and not act under pressure. This isn't about being overly cautious, but about having the ability to plan your move in your own best interest, rather than just reacting to urgent circumstances. The best approach is not to look for someone else's figure, but to do your own calculation. Someone else's experience can be useful only as a guide, but it doesn't provide an exact answer for your specific situation. Even among people moving to the same country, starting conditions, lifestyles, family composition, housing requirements, and adaptation timelines can vary significantly. Therefore, it is safest to rely not on average statistics, but on your own input data. To do this, you need to determine the cost of moving and paperwork, your monthly living budget based on your specific situation, the period during which you want to feel secure and stress-free, a separate reserve for unexpected expenses. It is precisely this approach that makes the calculation truly useful. It helps you avoid lulling yourself with rosy expectations and instead build a financial foundation you can rely on in real life. The more honestly you assess potential expenses and the adjustment period, the less likely you'll have to urgently revise your entire plan after moving. The more honest you are in your calculations, the more reliable your move will be. There are expenses you'd like to cut first, but these are often the very ones that affect the quality of your adjustment. During the preparation phase, the desire to save money is completely understandable. It seems best to cut back on everything possible to make the move itself more affordable. But the problem is that some expenses are directly linked not to luxury comforts, but to your safety, stability, and ability to get through the first few months in your new location smoothly. You shouldn't skimp too much on legally sound and safe housing, documents and assistance if you need help, insurance, basic living comfort, a financial reserve for the initial period after moving. Cutting corners too aggressively in these areas often backfires. Unreliable housing can create additional problems and new expenses. Errors in paperwork or attempting to resolve complex issues without proper support sometimes end up costing more than getting quality assistance right away. The lack of a financial reserve makes any setback particularly painful and robs you of freedom of action. Saving should be sensible. It's better to avoid unnecessary purchases, postpone non-essential spending, or choose a more modest starting arrangement than to cut the part of the budget that ensures your stability. It is precisely this reserve that helps you navigate the adjustment period more calmly and prevents the first few months after moving from becoming a constant struggle against the circumstances. A financial cushion for moving is neither a luxury nor an over-insurance. It is a normal foundation for a confident start. You really need funds not just for tickets and the first month, but for the entire transition period into your new life. The better prepared your financial reserve is, the smoother your adjustment will be, the lower the risk of making wrong decisions, and the higher your chances of settling into your new country without undue pressure. If you're just planning to immigrate to the EU, submit a request for a free consultation with Immigrantinlaw's lawyers. We'll develop the optimal relocation strategy for you, prepare all the necessary documents, explain the nuances of the law in detail, and answer all your questions. We'll analyze your case, your goals, and your situation without using templates. Want to learn more or start the process today? Contact us. All contact details are listed in the description below this video. We're here to help you take a confident step toward a new life. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and ask your questions in the comments. I'll be happy to answer them. Discover a world of possibilities with Immigrantinlaw.